Welcome to the Republican Professor. This morning for me in California, we have the best guest ever, Master Chief Larry Wilske, United States Navy, retired. Thanks for being here, Master Chief.
My pleasure and an honor.
So, Larry, I've just met you through a mutual firearms acquaintance, and I know that you teach firearms. How did you get into that?
Well, professionally, as a SEAL, that's part of what you do. And one of our core missions overseas in all special operations is called Foreign Internal Defense, where we train other militaries how to be a military. Whether you agree with it politically or not, that's just one of the core competencies. Not a mission SEALs like, but we'll do it. And that's where you really cut your teeth on the instruction side, because you're instructing foreigners a lot of times through interpreters and areas where people may or may not even want you there. So it's a pretty hostile environment and a hostile crowd, but we have to do our job. That's where I got started training other folks in firearms and SEALs as well, because we're always training.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service. You were in the United States Navy, obviously. So did you go right into being a SEAL out of high school?
No, actually,
okay.
I went to college, and then I was recruited in the Navy to be on the wrestling team.
No kidding. What? Really?
So that's what got me in the Navy. And
I didn't even know there was a wrestling team. Really? Wow.
Well, at one point in time, we were one of the top 2 in the nation.
Huh.
And that's in the open division for freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling. The year I came on was in 1983 when I joined the Navy and joined that team. We had just had 4 people on the prior Olympic team, so we had a really good team.
What? Wow.
And
now this is not the Naval Academy team, right? This is
this is the Navy team that competes on an open level. So this is what feeds the Pan Am Games, the University Games, the Olympics, and all 4 services have their own teams, and they're pretty top notch.
What weight class did you wrestle?
149.5 and 163.
149 and 163. Okay. And how old were you?
23 and 24 when I was on the wrestling team.
Okay.
Huh. And then after that, one of the guys in the team had been a SEAL team washout. He washed out of training, but everything he had to say was real positive. He loved it. And the more he talked about it, the more I wanted to take a look at it. So I went and tried out, and then my career changed. So went to training, had some, just a great time. It was the most wonderful experience ever. If you're wired for it, you got something to laugh about every day. If you're not, it's miserable. But I was wired for it, so I dug it.
What does it take to be wired for that? When you say wired, what does that mean? What's in your mind when you say that?
They teach you a lot of things in training. Academically, you have to stay focused, and you always have to study. The physical side of it is get you out of your comfort zone, so you learn new comfort zones.
Oh.
And then they teach you, how to swim, how to run, how to carry heavy things, how to shoot, move, communicate, how to do scuba diving, health, first aid. There's a lot of things you learn in that 6 months, and it's done under pressure situations constantly. So if you don't mind pressure situations, you enjoy learning, and you are the type of person that wants to find out, okay, what's my next comfort level? You're wired for it. But we had folks that showed up that were phenomenal athletes that never got out of their comfort zone, that didn't do very well because they'd never been pushed beyond their exceptional natural abilities. So there were a lot of folks that you would think, oh, they'll make a great SEAL. And then the pudgy kid that shows up from nowhere, who's not done a whole lot, but has really enjoyed it and was tougher than nails, does real well with it. So you can't really tell until you're in training if it's something for you or not. For me, it was just the greatest experience ever.
I'm sure you're used to hearing people say, "That's cool." That's cool. That's cool, Master Chief. So you were okay. I just want to get. So what did you major in college?
Business. I didn't finish. I got my first 3 years in, and then I finished after I was in the Navy.
Where'd you do your college at?
San Diego City, San Diego Mesa, and San Diego State colleges.
Oh, okay.
And
So
then
you're
I
from
finished
San
up at
Diego?
National University. I am.
Oh,
Then I
okay.
finished up at National University in San Diego.
Wow. Okay. So now, where did you go to boot camp?
2 miles from where I live in San Diego.
Gosh, that's where I went too. We always heard the Marines over the fence, but then they closed that base down for that. So what was your rating when you got you? What did you
Well, I
have?
had a few of them. So
Okay.
I started out as a operations specialist, shipboard communications, radar, information collection. And then when I made all the way to first class, then to go to chief, I switched over to bosun mate because OS had classified study material that we couldn't take with us in the field, and bosun mate study material I could take anywhere. So I made chief as a bosun mate. Then when I was a senior chief, we created our own rating, special operator. So then I switched to SO, and that's where I went all the way to master chief. And then as a master chief, I was given the rating of command master chief. So I had a number of rates.
Wow. I did not know that. So you had, so this, as a senior chief, you had your rating was special operator, special operations, or special
No,
warfare?
I was a bosun mate as a senior chief.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I think I missed that. And your last command, you were the senior enlisted, so you're the command master chief, or
Not at my last command. I had 2 command master chief tours at one
Oh.
SEAL Team 7, where I was a plank gunner, so that was quite an honor.
no kidding?
And
Wow.
then
That's cool.
And then another one was at the logistics support command for the West Coast SEAL teams. So we were the logistics support for all of the SEALs that would operate from the Philippines to the Middle East and the West Coast team. So half of the SEAL teams.
Okay, so you just used the term plank owner. I know what that means, but there might be people that don't know because they're just a bunch of land lovers.
Sure.
What do you mean by
So a
that?
plank owner is when they commission a command in the Navy, a ship, or like a SEAL team, and they commissioned SEAL Team 7 in 2002.
Okay.
And I was the first chief assigned to the team. So I was a plank owner of the first plank of wood, for that ship, vessel, or command.
Do you still
So
have
the
that?
traditional Navy.
Do you still have
What's
that
that?
wood piece? You have that piece of wood?
No, I've got a little plaque.
You got a plaque. Okay, gotcha. That's awesome. I didn't know that SEAL Team 7 was started after 9/11.
It was actually, it commissioned after I got back from a tour at Afghanistan right after 9/11.
Oh,
So Afghanistan hit on September 11th, and then 21
Right.
days later, Task Force K-Bar from the West Coast was formed in at Masira, Oman, to conduct operations in Afghanistan.
what team were you with at that time?
SEAL Team 3.
SEAL Team 3. Have you hit all the teams yet?
No,
Or
I
say
I
yet as if
started
you're
out at
still in, but
SDV I started out at the SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1, SDV Team 1, and our primary mission was driving wet submersibles. So I was a primary pilot in 4 platoons there. And there was a lot of time underwater, cold and miserable. But it was
are those
really,
things the ones that just two guys are in? Or
it
is
can
that
be
just
2, it can be more. I think
Oh,
the
really?
absolute
Okay.
number is still classified, but 2 guys, pilot and navigator. At the time, we had 2 different types of mini subs. Now they're down to 1. And it was challenging. It was great. Got to go all over, anywhere with cold water, we were in it. So we got to dive in some really cold, out in the middle of nowhere places.
Wow.
And then after STV Team 1, I went to the Navy parachute team, the Leapfrogs, and that was a lot of fun. A few extra injuries, but a lot of fun.
I was gonna
And
say,
then from there, I went to
how's your
SEAL Team
knees?
3. What's that?
I was gonna say, how's your knees?
I'm looking at new ones sooner or later.
Oh man, can't even imagine. How
Well, no,
okay, so
the jump,
when you're jumping, how much gear are you carrying? What's the give people a sense of how much stuff you have with you? You got how
on
much
the Navy
crap are you
parachute
carrying?
team, it was nothing. It was a sport rig and a cool jumpsuit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
In the teams, for if we had combat equipment jumps, you could have 100, 150 pounds hanging off your body,
That's like a guy.
and that's
That's like
your
another
weapon.
guy, or that's like another guy hanging off you when you're jumping out of a.
It is, but the canopies that we used for those jumps were huge, so they were big
Okay.
enough to accommodate all that. And you still didn't land very hard with the big square canopies. The round canopies that we jumped, those were not comfortable landings. You land like a bag of bricks.
Is that what the
But we
Army
use those for
uses?
water jumps as well.
Is that what the
Pardon me?
Army, is that what the Army uses, you know, when you see them jumping out one after another?
They do both. For mass jumps, they use round canopies. Then for their free fall parachuting, that means where you leave an aircraft and you have to pull your own ripcord. They use the same ones across the boards in the military. So I actually went to Army jump school in Fort Benning, Georgia, which is
Okay.
the same place my dad went to jump school for World War II.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's kind of interesting.
Did your dad serve in the Army?
He did. He was in both the 101st and 82nd Airborne in World
No
War
kidding.
II,
Wow.
and pretty colorful career. Had a great time. Enjoyed it. He was a combat engineer, so he was a bomb guy, and it was really filtered over to me as a UDT, a SEAL bomb guy. So it was kind of good to keep some family alive in that world.
How many, well, how much did your wrestling training and mentality help you, or did it help at all, do you think?
I think I've had training camps that I was at that were harder than SEAL training. They just didn't last as long. They were 4 to 6 weeks. And you could take a beating for 4 to 6 weeks pretty good. SEAL training was 6 months.
Yeah.
But the you know, they've done studies over the years how to get more guys in training. And I believe one of the studies looked at athletes, and the #1 graduating athlete for going through training was wrestlers. I think water polo players were up there pretty good too. So I'm sure it helped, because wrestling has got some levels of misery that go with the program. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the kind of competitive wrestling that you were doing sounds pretty intense as well. When you were, how long were you on that Navy wrestling team?
2 seasons.
Is that like 2 years, or is that
just under 2 years?
Just under 2 years.
Because I left the team my second year, right after the Nationals, is when I left to go to SEAL training, and I had to go to a command in between because they had to kind of get me there. But that was my exit from the wrestling team.
So you were like a seaman. Were you a seaman at that time?
Seaman, E3, yes.
E3, okay. With all your college, you came in as a seaman?
I did.
Okay. We have the unfortunate rank of seaman recruit for the lowest possible E1. You know, that's if you don't have any college, and if you have some college, you come in a little bit higher. So you made petty officer after you did. Were you through buds before you made petty officer, or how'd that work?
It was interesting because when you're on the Navy wrestling team, you have to have a parent command. And I was assigned to the USS Hewitt, a ship that I had never even been to. So I'm on the wrestling team, and then to get my orders to go to BUDS, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, I had to actually go back to the Hewitt and meet my ship. And while I was there, I liked it. I enjoyed it. The time on board, the ship was over the Indian Ocean. They flew me out there to get on the ship and then cruise back to San Diego. And on that cruise, about 2.5, 3 months, I was able to get surface warfare qualified, which is usually takes about 1.5 years.
Really? Wow.
And the skipper gave me a command advancement to 3rd class while on board after just being there for 3 months. He waived the 1 year on board requirement. So I enjoyed it. So I was working hard, and apparently somebody thought it was a good thing.
I don't think I've ever met a SEAL that was surface qualified as well as the SEAL. You don't usually see that. It's a different thing you put. I mean, it wouldn't fit on your uniform anyway, because you have the trident, and then they always have the jump wings at the bottom. There'd be nowhere for you to. I guess you could put it on your belt buckle, but I don't know why you do that.
Yeah, I mean, my uniform looks ridiculous. I look like a Mexican general.
I bet. What's your highest award for your ribbons?
The highest award, a Bronze Star with a V.
Wow. That's a big deal. So did you get that in Iraq or Afghanistan?
I got a couple of them, and they were in Iraq.
Iraq. Okay. Um, and you liked being on the ship before you went to Buds. Wow. Man, you
I
really
did.
are
I
a Navy
actually,
guy. You are a
I,
total Navy guy right there.
I loved it. I would have made that a career had I not had other plans.
Huh. When you were on the ship, so when you were getting third class, and your rating at that time was operations specialist, is that right? Does that sound
Yes.
right? Okay. So you were you were getting advanced to OS3 or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, and you liked it out there in the Indian Ocean. What were you doing day to day? Can you say?
Well, we were on my division, we had 6 on, 6 off. So 6 hours at work, 6 hours off. And that's how we go around the clock. So I would take 6 hours for a sleep cycle. And the other 6 hours would be working out, doing my rate training, doing my um, surface warfare training, going around to every different division, learning stuff. And while I was doing that, I took on a job. I was out on deck one day and I looked up at the superstructure and it looked a little ratty. So I talked to some bosun mates out there and said, hey, you guys wouldn't mind if I painted that, would you? So I painted the
What?
whole superstructure in about a month while we were underway because just
Huh.
I wanted that thing to look nicer, and had a great time doing it. I mean, we had rough weather, and I was up there swinging back and forth in a bosun chair, and it was kind of like an on-running comedy with the crew. Who is this idiot?
Nobody else wanted that job. So you gave
Well,
yourself a
no,
job. Yeah,
I did, and so I
that's
was
funny.
really busy the whole time, and there were people on board that hated being there. There were sailors that couldn't stand being in the ocean. I love being out of the water. I don't get seasick. So to
Wow.
me, it was just a fantastic adventure that I was actually getting paid.
Now at that time, you have this, wow, you're like probably the Navy's dream at this point. I mean, like whoever your chief was at that time is probably like, holy cow, where'd this guy come from? So you're at that time, you're painting the ship. When is it that you want to go out and shoot guns and jump out of planes and sneak up on bad guys? Are you
Well,
thinking that at that time? Are you thinking, oh, I want to go kick ass
I was
or what?
doing the job. I was doing the job at hand like I would never have another job in my life. But I knew I was getting orders to buzz.
Oh,
The
you
whole
already
ship
knew
did.
that. Okay.
Yeah, that's why they sent me to the ship, because I
Okay.
had to go there to get my orders and check out. But the ship was in the Indian Ocean, so they couldn't get rid of me until they got back to San Diego.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, might as well. It's a standard question. You want to tell us about buds?
Um,
I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there. Anybody could look it up,
well,
but
I mean,
yeah.
like I said, I enjoyed it, and I found something to laugh about every day. Our class 139, we started with 117 guys who graduated by 17, and
Wow.
it was cold weather
Hmm.
during Hell Week, so that weeds a lot of people out because some people physically can't do well with cold.
What
Fat guys like
month
me
was it?
do.
What month was it during Hell Week? Do you
Hell
recall?
Week was February, I believe.
Oh, that's pretty cold down in San Diego. Yeah.
It was chilly, but the instructor staff was great. I mean, the greatest coaching staff on the planet. And I've had
Mhm.
good coaching staffs throughout, 30 years of wrestling, 35 years of wrestling. So the coaching staff, the instructor staff was fantastic. If it was okay, if you were one of those guys that didn't mind getting yelled at, because they never did anything to you like torture you. You got everything you earned, good, bad, and indifferent. And it paid to be a teammate, paid to be a winner, and paid to put your nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. I really did. And I've got some good friends of mine that were my instructors still today.
That's awesome. Did
Yeah,
you
so
ever
I
have
like,
did you ever have a doubt in your mind that you were going to finish buds?
no,
That's and so that's probably why you finished.
there's some luck to it because you get injured as well. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
that's
injuries.
true. Yeah.
People get beat up there.
Mm.
There's just circumstance.
Yeah,
So I
that's
got
right.
lucky enough to stick it out. Had some good guys. Ended up doing real well in my class, and I liked it.
Are you an optimist by nature? Uh,
Absolutely.
yeah, really? Hmm. Wow. Do you think that helped you in your Navy career?
Absolutely. I mean, I
How,
still believe there's people out there in the world that need to get punched in the face, but I think that's a good thing too.
you have a good sense of justice and you have a good sense of propriety and happiness. Wow, that's a nice combination there. So give us the overview. You spent how many years in the Navy?
30.
Wow, that's a lot. And were you aching at the end of it?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that because at the end of it, there was a job. My last tour of duty was the Navy War College teaching at the Senior Enlisted Academy and
No
lecturing at the
kidding.
Navy War
Really?
College.
No, wow, that's awesome.
And then I was nominated to be the director of the Senior Enlisted Academy, which would have meant extending me past 30 years. And I didn't get picked up for the job, and I was happy about it, to tell you the truth,
Hmm.
because I could no longer be a SEAL. Physically, I was done. Even though, I mean, on my 50th birthday, I ran 50 miles as a stupid thing to do on my birthday. But even still, the young guys in the teams, you know, you can't lead from the back of the pack. You have to lead from the front or the middle, or at least enough effort from the last half that everybody wants to be ahead of you. You have to be able to push people one way or the other.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had, I think, 16 surgeries and 64 broken bones. And,
Oh my gosh.
you know, I had taken some lumps. So
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been fair, although there were guys that stuck it out a little longer than they should have. It wouldn't
Yeah.
have been fair to me as a leader or any of the men if I'd have stayed on and continued on. So the 10-year saying you've done your 30, get out was actually a good thing.
Hmm. And you got out as a master chief, which is the highest rank you can get as an enlisted. That's E9. For those of you who don't know the ranks, it's a seaman, E3, and then there's three petty officers, third, second, and first class. That corresponds to like corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant in the Army, Marines. And then you have the senior enlisted, which is chief petty officer, which would be like a gunnery sergeant in the, or a first sergeant in the Army, or gunnery in the Marines. And then all the Air Force people are like, wait, what about us? And then you have the senior chief, which is E8, and master chief E9. So you went all the way up. Did you ever want to be an officer?
There was a point in my career, I think I was in my third platoon, where my swim buddy was a Naval Academy grad, and actually it was my second platoon, and he and my platoon commander had nominated me for a program, for a commissioning program. But generally that program was really designed for minorities, and as a blue-eyed white guy, I didn't really get picked up, and that was the only time I ever really considered it. And the other side of it was because in the SEAL teams, as an enlisted guy, being able to deploy to do your job is the pinnacle of what you want to do. So I was able to deploy 14 times. The deployments from 6 to 11 months. Then the normal officer career path will have them deploy 4 to 6 times at the most. An average enlisted career paths, guys deploy 6 to 7 times. So I was able to really get my money's worth, and they were able to get their pound of flesh.
Gotcha. Wow, that's different. I didn't realize, it makes sense when you say it, but I didn't realize there was that much of a difference between officers versus enlisted. But now I guess it does make sense.
Well,
It does seem like there's a lot of senior enlisted that are deploying. But you don't see the senior officers deploying. They're over there in the cubicle or whatever. Oh, do they really?
When I was a young guy in the teams, we would have a platoon, 14 to 16 guys, go to a operational commander like Third Fleet, or not Third Fleet, Fifth Fleet or Seventh Fleet. We would deploy forward to a theater commander, and then later SOCOM had theater commanders as well. So we would deploy to those guys, and then after 9/11, we started doing whole command deployments. So the commanding officer XO everybody deployed. But that's on a 2-year cycle. So where it used to be an enlisted guy, I could come back home from a deployment when I was in SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 1 as a primary pilot. Platoons wanted a primary pilot, somebody who could drive the boat. So I could get out of one platoon and go right into another one. And I took advantage of that.
Yeah.
And then when I was in SEAL Team 3, we had a lot of chiefs that were in training department and they were kind of landlocked. So as a chief at SEAL Team 3, I was able to deploy another 6 times.
Wow.
Which was great. So you can, if you're willing to raise your hand and say, I'll do it, there was a lot of opportunity. There are officers that have had 7, 8 deployments. There were other enlisted guys that had as many. I knew a couple of guys that had more deployments than I did. So it's really up to the individual.
Yeah. What did you like most about deploying? It's probably hard to answer that question because maybe each one is
It's easier
different.
to answer what I didn't like because I missed my family and I missed home and I was gone all the time. I averaged about 250 to 300 days a year gone for my first 23 years. And
you had a family during this time?
Tough. Three kids that still, I think they know my name. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was the tough part. And it was a sacrifice. And I told daughters, and I told my girls, early on, the country should really be thanking you and not me because you didn't have a choice. I did. But the good thing about deploying is if you want to take your skill sets and put them to work, you don't do it at home, you do it out there. So the best way to do that is be out there. So I deployed everywhere. I didn't go to South America. I didn't go to Europe, but I went to, I did a tour in Bosnia. So yes, I did do some Europe stuff.
No South America. Wow.
No South America. I did get a great deployment to East Timor, another great deployment to Bosnia, which was one of my more fun deployments because we were so busy. And then at Team 3, our area of operation at the time was the Middle East. So all of those deployments were the Middle East. And then at Team 7, we were at war. So it was Iraq and Afghanistan. And all of my tours at 7 were to Iraq. Even though at one point we had a task element, a team in Afghanistan. And those guys were absolute war heroes. So that task unit, which I did not get to join in that deployment, was full of some of the best SEALs in our history.
What was that task unit called?
Well, 3, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was. I know the guys, but I don't have the permission to give their names out right now. If I did,
just their social security numbers.
Yeah, socials, names, checking account numbers. But that task unit was full of some of the most phenomenal SEALs ever. Even though the guys in Iraq were equally as good, they didn't have the opportunities, nor did they have a leadership that would take gloves off and let them get to work like the guys in Afghanistan did.
Is there a lot of competitiveness in the teams, like between each other? Who's more of a badass?
It's brotherly. I mean, the East Coast and the West Coast.
Yeah.
The West Coast guys are smarter, generally much better looking, and don't mind having a suntan. The East Coast guys, they're fat. They do live in caves, but they do okay.
Yeah, they do okay. That's funny. Seems like you have to have a sense of humor to do that job well. My goodness.
If you don't, then you're going to be in the nut house.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, you seem like you came out of it okay. Geez, you seem like you're normal. I mean, if you were just walking around Costco, I would think you're like a normal guy.
Well, that's the whole idea.
Yeah.
And the idea too, when you're in teams, is you want to be that guy as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if you could go back, would you do it all again?
Well, I'd love to, because if I knew now, I'd make a lot fewer mistakes.
Yeah. What would you do differently?
Well, there are a lot of leadership decisions that I made along the way that I regret. Some of them, there were a couple that were really tough decisions that were not very popular that I would still make again. But there's always something that you wish you could have done a little different. And sure, I'd love to. Wouldn't we all?
What rank were you when 9/11 happened?
9/11 happened when I was a chief. And I had literally just got back from a deployment overseas where the majority of the deployment was working against smuggling vessels coming out of the Shah al-Arab out of Iraq. So we were taking down smuggling vessels, oil mostly, other cargo, for months. It was a great deployment. I think like 80 or 90 of these vessels that we captured and gave over to the Navy for NATO to do with what they would. And then I got back on September 4th or 5th, something like that. And I was at home on post-deployment leave when I watched 9/11 on the news like most Americans did. And then got a phone call the next week, started packing up. 21 days later, we were in Sierra Leone putting together a task force cable.
And then you went into Afghanistan in 2001?
We were in Afghanistan in 2001. And I left in 2002. And when Task Force K-Bar, we handed over to the next group and we were gone.
Tell us what K-Bar was. What was that, the initial and
there were a few different task units. We were the joint combined special operations task group, so task force. So we had all of the foreign special operations teams under our command. So we had, I think there was a representation for like 30 nations, but there were 6 or 7 that really did all the jobs. So we were working with all the different countries' national mission forces, their tier 1 assets, and they were all good. I mean, the soldiering was good. We got to get the Germans out on the first real world operation since World War II outside of Germany.
Wow.
And the KSK guys, they did great. Good kids, good soldiers. Enjoyed it. Got to work with the New Zealanders, tough as nails, as you would expect, because they'll tell you they are. The Canadians were great. The Dutch were good. All of them, all the foreign operators were good operators.
Was that the first time you had worked with the foreign operators?
Pardon me?
Was that the first time you had worked with foreign operators at that time?
No, nobody had ever worked at that level where we were all under one hat. And we were under our Commodore from the West Coast, who's still a friend of mine. He was the guy that put it all together and made it happen. So it was incredible. And then when we got out there, we actually put our flag under General Mattis's flag at Air Base Rhino in Afghanistan, and did a push north through Zagreb through Kandahar into Bagram Air Force Base. And once we took that, we settled it all out, and we were all over the place, we operated everywhere.
So you were there at the beginning, and you saw how it ended last year. Do you have any comments about that?
I've got a lot where I could really get a lot of expletives in it, but it was a disappointment, to say the least. We left a network of intelligence there that took 20 years to build that we'll never be able to regain. And that network of intelligence didn't just hit Afghanistan, that gave us network into Iran, networking into the whole Caspian Basin. We had a massive network that was facilitated through Afghanistan that we just abandoned. And all of those people that were working for us in those countries, we hung them out to dry. So we as a nation, when we said, oh, we're leaving, and then we packed up and left Americans there, and all of those that supported us overtly and covertly, in my humble opinion, we committed mass murder. So it was not a good exit. And you and I don't know the classified side of the exit strategy. I may be wrong on a number of counts there, but I doubt it.
Right.
And hopefully there was a classified exit strategy that makes a lot of sense and is put together very well, but we won't know that.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that's well said on everything you said. You're very restrained.
Oh yeah, when we talk about our current commander-in-chief, you bet.
You're a master chief. You're used to being. What's it like being a master chief? I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a lot, but I mean, do you have to? You're working with the senior officers and stuff. you have to be restrained, but also like you have to like unleash hell sometimes, don't you?
The teams, because it's not Master Chief, it's Larry most of the time. And the teams, you're working with people that are so unbelievably capable. You never forget that junior brand new guy,
Yeah.
although he's a loose cannon and needs to put a cork in his bottle more often than not, is probably more capable than I'll ever be. So when you've got people that are all more capable and smarter than you everywhere you look, you have to keep that in mind, because you're not giving orders, you're shaping something.
Yeah.
You don't
That's
want
good for you.
to give orders. You want to open the door with invitations. And
Wow.
that's different than the rest of the military. When
Yeah.
I went to the Navy War College and was teaching at the Senior Enlisted Academy of the Navy War College, it was really difficult for me to be called Master Chief, for one. And two, to watch my peers be angry, mean, nasty people. It just didn't, because that was the reputation they thought they had to fulfill. Because in the teams, if somebody doesn't like you, it doesn't matter where they are at the hierarchy, it doesn't bode well for you.
Yeah.
Because
That makes
the most
sense.
important thing there is your reputation as an operator, nothing else.
Right.
And
How is that established, your reputation as an operator?
everybody watches everybody.
Yeah.
And there's going to be
it's not on
disgruntled
in other words, it's not on paper. It's by
Mhm.
reputation, by word of mouth.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's disgruntled postal workers along the way, and you'll have your fights and your infighting. But yeah, for me as an operator at STVs, I was really good. At the regular SEAL teams, I was average. I didn't mind being average. As a leader, because I was able to go to a lot of different places, I was given a lot of latitudes along the way. So the interaction as a Master Chief with the officers and the team was very peer-like, unless it needed not to be. And
Right.
that was my job to know when that was and step it up a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you were in Afghanistan in 2001, and did you go back to Afghanistan after that?
I did not.
Okay.
My subsequent deployments were all to Iraq.
How many deployments did you do to Iraq then?
Total of 5 and 1.
5. Wow.
So five to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan.
So you spent years in Iraq, really? I mean, well,
Yeah,
what,
you look at it.
2 years, something like that?
2.5 years. One of those was a staff support deployment, which nobody wants to do, but you have to do them.
Tell us what,
that,
yeah, what's that like, being a staff support?
well, you're in a special operations command and control center.
Is it
an operations center or
is it a building? Is it a building you're in? Is it a tent? What is
one
it?
was a tent, one was
Yeah.
a real nice building, but because we moved. But you're just supporting operations all over the place, and your job is to do your desk job and give them arms, equipment, food, logistics, combat support, legal support, everything they need to do to get their job done. So you're just part of that staff.
Okay.
A battle set.
Were you senior chief at the time?
Master.
Yeah. Well, this is a huge sacrifice. I mean, it sounds like you made the best of it, but at this time, during 2001, did you have a family at that time? Did you have kids and stuff?
Oh, I did.
What's that?
Yeah, I did. My
You
girls
did?
were all born in the 80s. So
Oh,
I
okay.
had teenage daughters during the war. And at one point I had full custody of them as a single dad, but my mom lived close.
Okay.
So they were my mom's more often than not. And that really helped out a lot. But the girls were tough and resilient. And, they didn't like it. They still don't like it, but we're all good.
What do you think about the VA support for veterans, in terms of medical, psychology, all that stuff?
Well, the VA, when I was retiring, I qualified for 100% military disability. So for medical, there's medical TRICARE, which got all hacked up by Obamacare.
Yes.
And then there's the VA. If you're a disabled vet, I could get all my medical there. So I just recently switched from the VA. And the VA in San Diego is train wreck, and here's why. The medical professionals, doctors, physicians assistants, nursing staff, they're fantastic. The bureaucracy to get to them is a nightmare. And I'm formidable when it comes to going and getting something that I deserve. And my biggest angst with the VA, I mean, I would love to wave a flag and be the secretary of the VA. My angst is, let's say there's a E3 or E4 Marine who got out because he got his legs blown off. And these people treat him poorly, and he treats them respectfully and takes whatever they give him and doesn't fight for himself. And there's no patient advocacy in the VA that's big enough and strong enough in and around San Diego. Now, when I moved out to Kentucky, where I'm at now, the VA support's fantastic. And that's because the people here are just that much more patriotic. Even still, I've transferred back over to TRICARE because it works better for my medical stuff, but I'm still paying because TRICARE was supposed to be free when I signed up. If you do 20, you get medical for life. Now I'm paying a pretty hefty premium. It's managed by Humana. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but that was all part of Obamacare. And they shifted a lot of money around to make big healthcare providers and big pharmaceuticals a payday like nobody else. And that's why they're in their hip pocket. So politically, I don't like the VA being used or TRICARE or the veterans being used as political pawns, but because of the money that works, we always will be.
Yeah. So, Larry, I've been calling you Master Chief because I can't help it. I mean, like, as soon as someone said you were a Master Chief, I was like, okay, I can't help it, man. It's in my DNA. I can't do it. I can't help it. I appreciate you being so forthright about and sharing everything so joyfully about all this stuff, because you've been through more hardship than 99% of people I know, that's for sure, as far as your career goes anyway. And we're wondering, what do you do for a living now? Do you do anything for fun or money?
I do. One of the things I do for money is I'm a consultant to a maritime logistics company out of San Diego.
Cool.
I was one of their offshore logistics vessel captains because I've got my 200-ton rating, which is, I love driving boats, so that's fun. And then, now I coordinate their military training support and a lot of their military work. I work with shipyards and stuff. Now I can do that remotely from Kentucky, and it doesn't really take a lot of my time. So the rest of the time, I've got horses.
Oh, cool.
Who I talk to nightly. Yeah, I love the boys.
Nice.
And obviously the small arms stuff, where I get to support Vanguard training, and I support him as a range safety officer.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
would love the small arms training. I've got a range in my backyard.
No kidding. You lucky dog. That's awesome. So you can go step out your backyard and shoot.
We're in the kitchen, and behind me is a tree with a target on it. So I literally can walk out of the kitchen and go there, but I've got to walk a few hundred yards down to where the range is, where I've got some metal targets set up. And I mean, I've got 60 acres, so I can do whatever I want.
How cool is that?
It's awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, and Kentucky is beautiful. I've driven through that state, and I was shocked. Like I grew up in Colorado, and I didn't visit Kentucky till I was in my 20s. I couldn't believe like how awesome it was. Like just fields and trees and horses.
I'm 10 minutes from one of the biggest lakes in the state. I've got a boat in the front yard. And then I'm 20 minutes away from the largest cave complex in the world.
Wow, really?
There's no end to what's cool about Kentucky.
Yeah. That's really, so what's the connection with Kentucky? You didn't grow up there. You grew up in San
No,
Diego.
I was getting sick of California, even though I grew up there. So
Okay.
I've been to every state in the union. And I took a couple of years ago, I hopped on my motorcycle and drove through all of the southern states and came back through the middle states. And it came up between Kentucky and Tennessee. And Tennessee, I mean, there's some really beautiful areas around Chattanooga, just gorgeous countryside, good horse country.
Yes.
But Tennessee was kind of like it would be a self-licking ice cream cone for me. Everybody politically thinks the same way I do. Everybody. The whole state bleeds red, white, and blue. They're all conservative. They're all First Amendment, Second Amendment people. They understand the 10th Amendment and they hold on to it very strongly. Kentucky is a very red state with a blue governor. And it reminds me of California 35 years ago. But I'd rather come here and join the fight because I know where it's going if they stay on this track. So I'm getting a little more active here. After the primaries, I'll get a lot more active here. But I think I think I bring something to the table in that I watched this happen in California.
That's right.
And I'm seeing the indicators here that we can stop now. So I'd rather, that was the difference was go join a fight. It's a little bit more my style. So
that makes a lot of sense. Wow, that's very strategic. I'm glad to hear that. What's the connection with horses? Did you grow up with horses?
No,
is that something later?
So an ex-wife's cousin was a horse person, and we started visiting them and then moved out to East San Diego County, got a little 8-acre ranch, and I got my first horse, Dutch, who's still my boy now. And then, years later, we broke up, but I was already an addict. I love them. I was in a pretty good horse club, and I've learned an awful lot about moving cattle with horses, which can be high speed fun or low speed fun. Spent a lot of time with the saddlebags full of beer out the trail, having a great time. So I enjoy not just horses, but the culture of people around. So I'm hooked. Got 3 boys, and they're good horses.
That's awesome. So you do some firearm instruction. What's the approach you take with firearm instruction? What do you hope that people get out of it? People are interested in
the
that.
first thing is to not be afraid of firearms. That's, number one is there's nothing to fear. And then number 2 is don't get sophisticated, don't get complicated, stick to the basics, because the basics are, Olympic champs are the best at the basics of anybody in the world at any sport. So why go beyond it trying to find out the next Annie Oakley trick shot? It's just not going to work. So stick to the basics, enjoy what you're doing, know what a gun is and what it is not, and make it part of your own personal culture, make it part of your ethos. So that's really the big message.
Wow. And what kind of what occurs in firearm training? If someone's listening to this in the future and is wondering, all right, well, I'm going to try this out. What can they expect? What should they expect?
Well, with our team, because you've interviewed Desiree.
Yes, that's
right.
Who
was a phenomenal instructor. I mean, you should sit through one of her classes. I thought the guys in the SEAL teams were the best instructors ever until I saw her give a class. And I was just
right. Wow.
Well, she's calming, she's dialed in, she's very smart.
Yes, she is. Yeah.
And so that's really it's really good.
Yeah.
So getting people in a comfort zone starts in the classroom. And then taking them out to a range and teaching them that loud noise isn't something to be afraid of, is a matter of connection and individually connecting with people from all makes, models, and colors of humans. So that's the most rewarding part of it and the toughest part. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. You have a professional knowledge and experience of many different types of firearms. I'm sure you encountered all sorts of things in the field that people don't see in gun stores here. And you're familiar with how to break down, clean, use, put them back together. When you got out of the Navy and find yourself in a situation where there's a political movement to really, I think, to disarm people, like normal people. What do you think about that? Do you think that, yeah, I'll just let you answer. What do you think about that? And
Well,
if I mischaracterized it, feel free to
no,
say
you're
whatever.
right. It's a complex question because this is one of those, hey, wake up America. And if you look at the movement, the left progressive movement that's out there trying to take away our firearms,
Mhm.
they're Hitler wrote that playbook on his book Mein Kampf while he was in prison. And if you look at the progressive left, you've read Mein Kampf, you've seen their playbook. So what we're doing is we're being attacked by modern day Nazism of disarm, take over the education system, take over the economy, make national socialism, which is Nazi translated, or democratic socialism, a political movement that really only empowers a few and disenfranchises quite a few more. So it's a good model to take over a country or to destroy a republic. And the Democrats, the left, have embraced that model. Taken away our firearms, and the Second Amendment is very clear, shall not be infringed, is being infringed everywhere.
As we record this, this is August 11th, August 11th, 2022. This U.S. Senate is considering a so-called assault weapons ban and a so-called large capacity magazine ban that passed the House, I believe. Now, I haven't read the House version, so I don't know if it's like the California stuff that we saw. I don't know if you recall that, but
Oh, I do.
yeah. So it's not clear what's going to happen on the Senate side. Um, as a retired special warfare operator, United States Navy, 30 years. Larry, what do you think about civilians having so-called assault weapons?
Well, there's no such thing as an assault weapon. They're all assault weapons. I mean, if you look at mass murder, mass killings, mass shootings, the big thing lately in the press because they're horrific and they're shocking.
Yeah.
And there's been about 200 people killed since 2000 in mass shootings, maybe closer to 200 now. So mass shootings, 200 people killed. Last year, 350 people were, or more than 350 people were killed with hammers. So why don't we ban assault hammers?
With hammers? Wow.
With hammers. So we don't
Jeez.
need to really identify assault weapons. It's a matter of they're much more dynamic when they're used because of the loud noise, and
Yeah.
they've got political horsepower. And so all a shooting is versus a hammering is political horsepower. And the left has figured it out. And they're swaying people by the constant rhetoric and a very unified and very loyal to the cause message. But there's no such thing. Now, all of the laws that are being constantly tried, I'm not worried about it. We've got three branches of government for a reason. And the legislative branch can go against the Constitution all they want, because eventually there will be a case and shall not be infringed, will be looked at yet again, and it will side on the side of the Constitution. So, we have to be patient with that, but people have to vote, and they have to vote correctly.
That's right. Yeah. I agree
So I'm
with
not
that.
too worried. And even in California, I never had a permit of any sort in California, and I would carry a weapon anytime I wanted to, because my thought was real simple. Arrest me, let's go to court. Let's get this in front of the Supreme Court. If you want to take it that far, I'm willing to go. And I would implore more Americans out there, don't get a permit. If you want to carry a firearm, that's your constitutional right, and the Second Amendment's your gun permit. Get after it.
Wow. I think you might have just given us the title for this whole episode there, Larry. Jeez. Yeah, well, when you carried like that in California, I think it'd be interesting to say a little bit more about that. Can you give us an idea of how you're carrying it and how small a weapon is this? Is this a big gun? It's not like a Desert Eagle you're walking around with in your back pocket, right? So what
So
are you
rarely
carrying?
rarely would I carry, because guns cause as many problems as they solve.
Mhm.
And that's and I'm pretty comfortable with just my hands and me. And I'm also pretty comfortable avoiding something or seeing it coming. Nobody gets into a fight they don't see coming, or rarely do they get in a fight they don't see coming. So when I would carry would be when it's an unknown area or something, and I would carry it, usually the small of my back, usually a smaller 9mm.
Okay. Something like do you want to say what?
Oh, I've got this beautiful Ruger 9.5. I don't even think they make them anymore, but it's a real nice pistol. I've had it for a long time, so that's my go-to.
Yeah, I think I know what it looks like. Is it from like the 90s? Seems like I used to see those in the 90s a lot. Yeah. Are you a 1911 guy, a Glock guy? I have to ask these questions because people are going to be wondering. I should
Not
ask you what kind of
necessarily.
motorcycle you have
1911s.
to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do have a motorcycle. I don't have a 1911. I think they're great, wonderful history in that pistol. And it's a beautiful pistol. I think every good American family should have one, but it's just not for me. 7 rounds is enough. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I like a lot of rounds. Glocks are durable. They're accessible. Everybody has them, so they're pretty common. Great firearm. I don't have one. I mean, the last pistol I just got was a revolver. It was a Smith & Wesson 357 Magnum with 7 rounds. It's the coolest thing ever.
God bless you. Does it have a Hillary hole? Does it got one of those things? The new ones have the little lock, or is it a classic one? Oh, it's a classic one. Oh,
yeah. And then on rifles, so I had some gas operated guns. And then when I retired, I sold them and I got lever action guns because they look cooler. So I went from the AR-ish to a Henry 4440 and a Marlin 450.
Wow.
45-70 round. That's a big boomstick.
5.7, yeah. Yeah, the Marlin.
And I'm just as comfortable defending my home with those as I was 30 round magazine because I've got a lot of them and there's lots of rounds. So
yeah,
it's easy.
So you're kind of going back in time. You're going back to like the revolver time and then the lever action time.
Well, the photo I want my grandkids to see of me is the one with me sitting on my horse with my rifle in its scabbard and a seal trident on the saddle and on the scabbard.
That's cool.
Yeah, so cool picture.
It is cool. Now in terms of shooting in your backyard, I know ammo is really expensive. Do you do a lot of shooting or do you conserve ammo?
It's not as expensive here in Kentucky, and there's a lot of it. So I could shoot all I want.
How much ammo should people have, you think?
It depends on what you're comfortable with. I think every household should have a handgun and a couple of magazines. And then if you want to expand from there, it's your hobby. That's why the Constitution said you can.
Yeah. And
they don't tell you what you can or can't. In fact, I think the only legislation that was ever really written on type and amount was in the 1790s, where it was you can have at least 1 musket and at least 70 bullets, 70 rounds of ammunition.
Yeah.
So there was never a max. There was just a minimum in law. And that was because those people were considered part of their state militias.
Yeah. Can we
but
go
it's
back
up to the families? I mean,
yeah,
we can't tell people how many you can have. You can have all you want.
So it's kind of like horses. I mean, there's no law against how many horses you can have. It's how many you can afford. And
right. And
have responsibly.
It's like anything else. You can get stupid with it. And I know people that have too many horses and the horses get neglected and they don't get used. There are people that have too many firearms because they don't get used, they get neglected, they rust, or they don't get taken care of. And most of those folks who've got these ridiculous inventories don't know how to use them all effectively. And I always look at the part of the Second Amendment that says states can have their own militias, their citizen militias. And who knows if we ever get back to that. I know right now, if Texas wanted to solve the border crisis, it would be very simple. We'll form a state militia and have ammunition for everybody that shows up. And we'd have 2 million Texans on the border in about 5 minutes. So, that state militia clause will always be viable and it will always be feared by the left. So
They'll just
sky's
accuse
the
you of
limit.
racism. They'll say, yeah, there's 2 million white people, you mean, and they're trying to keep the brown people out. That's what they'll say.
Well, if you want to go down that road, I've got an idea. So years ago, I wrote an article about redistribution of, instead of redistribution of wealth, redistribution of arms. And at the time, California was confiscating 16,000 firearms a year from criminals. And California destroys them, which is criminal as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So my thought was to go into high crime, lower income minority neighborhoods and take people that are law abiding citizens that can't defend their homes. And every police precinct has an armor. Every police precinct has range safety officers and firearms instructors. And every good police precinct knows the neighborhood. So get people in the neighborhood, moms, dads, grandparents, aunts, uncles, that want to go through a basic handgun course, develop a basic proficiency, then arm them with a confiscated weapon and give them a reasonable loadout to protect their homes. Crime would go down exponentially overnight, and it would become a force multiplier for the police, because law enforcement doesn't show up usually during a crime. They show up after it's a big mess.
Yeah.
So I socialized this, this was a few years ago. I socialized it with Bishop McKinney in San Diego, Pentecostal Black priest, big leader in the San Diego Pentecostal community.
What's his name? What's his name again?
George McKinney.
George McKinney. Okay.
I believe his son has taken over his church. Great guy, very humble, very smart, brilliant American. And I really think that we could take cities like Chicago, Detroit, Louisville, Kentucky, where they've got high crime rates in Black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good folks in those neighborhoods that are not criminals. They can't afford a firearm. Or like in the case of Chicago, it's so regulated, they can't get what they need to protect their own home.
Right.
Well, let's arm, train, and equip those folks and let them protect their own home.
Wow.
But I'm a racist, so you gotta be careful.
Yeah. Well, so if I was committed just a priori to calling you a racist, Larry, how would I work that out? I would figure something out. So that's really good. I love that. Redistribution
Well,
of arms.
if you wanted to call me a racist and you wanted to, twist it like pick a CNN reporter, it would be really easy, because those guns are going to land in the hands of criminals.
Yeah, they would say you just want Black people to shoot each other. That's what you want.
Right. And I would just go back to Chicago and say, well, it's happening at 40 to 50 a weekend right now. So why don't we give the law abiding citizens that are victims an ability to defend themselves?
Yeah.
And I'd love to have that debate.
Here, here. That was Otis McDonald, the plaintiff in McDonald versus Chicago. That was a major Supreme Court decision in 2010. That was a guy from Chicago. He was Black.
Yeah.
He wanted to have a gun. The city of Chicago said, no, you have to wait for the police. Otis McDonald said, that just sounds wrong to me. I don't even think he was a Republican. I think he was just a guy that wanted a gun in Chicago. And the NRA actually paid for his lawsuit, and it got denied, going up. The Supreme Court took it right after the Heller decision. And that's the major decision that everybody looks at. And
it's funny. He's probably not a Republican or a Democrat. He's the most formidable thing in our country, and that's a neighbor with conviction.
Yeah, he had to be. I mean, he had to have tremendous courage. I can't imagine going up against the city of Chicago, which had, like, I don't know, I think they spent like $1 million to keep him from having a gun. That's a really interesting. I've never heard anybody say that idea there, Larry, about redistribution of arms. That's really interesting. Because you're right. So when they confiscate a gun for some reason, it's some bureaucratic reason, and it ends up in an evidence locker or whatever it is, it doesn't sit there forever. It just like it's so different than like a car or a house or anything else. Any normal item would be auctioned off and it would go back to private hands, right? Because it's
They
understood
do
this
that
is
in
a
Kentucky.
valuable, this is something valuable. You don't just destroy a car, you
No,
know.
they do that in Kentucky. They have public sales,
Yeah.
but in
So
California,
why
they
don't we do that
destroy
with
them.
guns? Yeah,
Yeah,
why don't
they
they?
destroy them.
It's so why is that wrong? If someone's wondering why is it wrong for the police to destroy the guns, why is that wrong, you think?
Well, if you take a look at the model that I'm proposing,
Mhm.
you're taking a firearm and a means to protect a law-abiding family,
It's valuable.
and you're throwing it away.
Yeah.
That's why it's wrong.
Yeah. I think it's wrong too because some of those firearms are historic relics and
Mhm.
they don't, they're valuable for historic reasons too. Sometimes
The
they're in
the
bad shape.
historical value is cool.
It is cool. It's where and
But think
it's
of,
valuable for training kids too about the history of their country and the
think
role
of
of
Compton,
arms.
Compton in California,
Yeah.
shootings daily. California destroys 15 to 16,000 firearms a year. They just took 1 year and redistributed those in Compton to law-abiding citizens and good families so they could defend themselves. Crime would drop, drug distribution would drop, human trafficking would drop. All of those things would drop, and they would drop significantly within 1 year. Sure, it's only theory what I'm saying, but it makes so much sense. But it also takes
Sure.
power and control of those people and the way they vote away from them
Yeah.
because they're fending for themselves.
Well,
And the
and it
last
also,
thing
yeah,
the Nazi regime wants are people that aren't dependent on National Socialism or the government.
I'm reading a really good book called, and you maybe have read it too. Sounds like you might have read it already. Called, oh geez, I had the guy on the podcast, Stephen Hallbrook, um, Gun Control in the Third Reich is what the book is called. It's
I
really
haven't
good.
read it,
Oh
but
man, you'd love it. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's called Gun Control in the Third Reich, and Stephen Hallbrook wrote it. We had him on the podcast.
cool.
He's a PhD and a JD, and he won 2 times before the U.S. Supreme Court. One was a gun case. Actually, I think they're both gun cases.
Hey, my battery's running low, so let me go grab a plug-in to plug it in.
Yeah.
Be right back.
Okay. I'll put this on pause. Okay, I got that book that I was just referring to called Gun Control in the Third Reich by Stephen Hallbrook, who was on the podcast a few months ago. And it's a legit book. I mean, guy's got a PhD. It's got all sorts of scholars and on the back that are saying it's legit. And I'm reading and it's richly footnoted, and the footnotes I cannot read most of them because they're in German. And so
Wow.
he's engaging the primary sources in German. I think he had a translator that I don't think he reads German himself, but he hired a translator. It's based on the archives in Germany. So there's actual, legitimate scholarship behind what the Master Chief is saying about National Socialism. And I like the way that you said National Socialism because it was National Socialism back in the Third Reich. So that's an ironic thing, Larry, about being called a racist for the views that you have, or people, views I might have that have nothing to do with racism. And actually, it's totally the opposite of what real racists have done. I mean, you're saying, no, we should do the opposite of what these guys did. These guys had a national firearms registry. It ended in disaster. It ended in total disaster. People couldn't defend themselves from just ordinary crime, let alone tyrannical movements in local government. So,
Well, part of that Mein Kampf playbook too is identifying a focus of hate because hate's such a good motivator. And 23% of Germany believed in Nazism, but they got them to hate so vehemently and so violently against Jews that it was a collective motivator. So the left, using Mein Kampf, the Democrat playbook, they identify who to hate. Who do they hate right now? Well, anybody that's from a Republican, anybody that's a middle income or above white person, anybody that exists to free the people and take the power away from the government. And then they've just got a playbook of very loyal sound bites that say you are a racist, a misogynist, a homophobe, this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
When the reality of it is, we have a First Amendment that says I can say and think whatever I want. But they're trying to diminish that right to freedom of speech as well. The First Amendment is protected by the Second Amendment. So to get rid of one, you have to get rid of the other.
Yeah, they go together. That's true. I'm going to make a link, connect an idea that Larry just said that was developed on the last guy we had on. I haven't posted it yet. Oh, actually, no, I did post it. Sorry, it's up on YouTube, where we had Chuck Michel, the president of the California Rifle and Pistol Association, who's won in federal court. A lot of his cases are now First Amendment cases. You can believe that. So he says the same thing. He says the First and Second Amendment, they tend to be attacked by the same groups. And I love that how you said that. You said the Second Amendment, I'm going to screw it up. You said the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. And I think it's the other way around too, because it's the First Amendment that protects the Second Amendment, which is what we're doing here. We're talking. And that's a huge part of it. Because I think there's a lot of, you're in Kentucky, which is sort of purplish in some ways. Would you say there's a lot of reasonable people there that can be persuaded? I mean, they're not all, the people on the other side are not all crazy, right? There's some people that have reasonable, they can be reasoned with, right? You could float an idea.
That's going to be the tactic that I want to employ. It's going to be after the primaries when we get started on this, is literally I want to reach into and figure out the right mechanism politically, reach into inner city Louisville, because we only have a blue governor because of Louisville, Lexington, and Bowling Green, Kentucky, because they have urban centers that have Democrat leaders that have been there forever. Like the sheriff in Louisville has been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
And he's not going away anytime soon. Crime rate there is three and a half times the national average. So I want to find a way to go into city center Louisville and say, hey, I'm going to offer free firearms training, basic firearms training for inner city folks that can pass a background check. So they're law-abiding citizens. And Kentucky is a very easy to get firearm state. So we're going to take that shot and see if we can't start empowering people. Because one thing, as a Republican, there's a few losses in our party, but with the biggest loss we have in our party is a constitutional-based recruiting plan.
Right.
Not all Democrats are left-wing socialist Nazi jackwagons. A lot of them are just good folks whose parents were Democrats.
That's right.
A lot of them are Kennedy Democrats.
Yes.
A lot of them vote because they only watch CNN and they're only influenced one way, but they've got good sense and reason about them, or a sense of patriotism. So as a Republican, we don't have a big strategic plan targeting those people. We have a plan targeting independents. Now, there's a lot of Democrats of all makes and models and colors that see sense and reason and freedom as sense and reason and freedom. So, we need to start recruiting. And
that's really good.
My contribution to the cause is going to be, here's what I want to do.
Do you have that in the works? Is that actually going to happen? Do you think?
I do. I've got a friend of mine's running for Congress up in Wisconsin. He's going to win. And part of his campaign team is a very.
Is he a SEAL?
He is.
I got a text message from him like a couple of weeks ago. It's obviously not his number, but I was like, how did he get this number? But I recognized him because I saw him. He was an actor in a movie, right? He was in. He did one movie.
He actually did a good job.
He did a good job. When I was watching it, I was like, I think that guy probably was active duty at some point, like really.
He was.
I could just tell.
With me. So he was one of our task unit chiefs. I was command master chief. We got back from the deployment, and since we were the ones that were on downtime, and this movie had been approved for like 10 years, all Team 7 guys were the actors in the movie.
You know, I could tell. I could just totally tell. I was like, there's something different about this movie. They don't feel like actors to me.
Yeah,
I don't know
and
what it
Derek,
was. I can't describe it. Yeah.
he didn't. Yeah, I think he's kept the same beard he had in deployment for the movie.
Huh. That's where I see. It took me forever to figure out where I recognized him from. And he has a certain
Yeah,
way he
good guy,
talks too.
very strong patriot,
Oh, good.
and
That's good.
like most team guys, very live and let live. He wants everybody to have a First Amendment, whether he agrees with them or not.
Hmm. Do you ever follow Dan Crenshaw?
I do.
On
He's been a little disappointing lately, but
it seems like whenever
yeah,
they get in office, they get disappointing, but I don't know if that's what you're talking about. But yeah, you mean the red
I don't.
flag laws? Are you talking about red flag laws or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he's got a charisma to him, so he's very popular.
Yep.
And he wasn't in the teams very long. He got beat up on his first deployment.
Yeah.
So that was a shame.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody should be allowed into Congress under 40 years of age. Because once you're in the
We got to
House,
change
well,
that.
when you're young and
Yeah.
you're in a position of influence
Yeah.
and power influences, and then somebody like Danny who's got a lot of charisma to him, they want him singing their song, whoever the they is.
Yeah.
So he's been influenced, and he'll grow out of it, and he'll snap into his own shoes soon enough, and then he'll be fine.
I listen to his podcast sometimes. I think for Republicans in Congress that are young like him, well, the reason I bring him up is because he has this one interview, or this one that he did. It wasn't an interview. It was How to Fight and Win, I think is what it's called, episode.
Mhm.
And I thought he did a really good job on that episode, How to Fight and Win, because he was talking about how to be persuasive. And that's actually the fight now. It's not occupying the Capitol or or something like that. That doesn't do anything, and in fact, it's counterproductive sometimes. So I think the issue of that. Well, that's what I love about your idea of going into Louisville, and it took me a long time to figure out how to say that that city. I was always saying Louisville, and they were like,
Right.
no, 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 it's Louisville. But going, engaged with your talents and your uh, everything you're bringing to the table, you particularly, and using those talents and skills that you've leveled up on over the years, and using it for patriotism and activism to try to recruit the other side and try to carve out some of these folks in these decaying cities to like, hello, this is America, this is your right, this is not just my right, it's your right too, we're fighting for both our rights here. Anyway, I thought that Crenshaw did a good job on that one episode, and that's all I'm going to say about him. I thought he did a good job on that one episode, and I appreciate that he's in Congress for the most part. And I think it would be good to have more.
He votes the right way most of the time.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's against the assault weapon ban. And I think we need more folks like you and is it Derek up in Wisconsin?
Yes.
Okay.
Derek Van Orden.
Okay. Yeah, I think we need folks like you guys in. I love that you're taking your combat veteran stuff and you're now channeling it to civilian political stuff. That's not necessarily an easy transition, right? But
well, it
working with
is
what you
because
have.
SEAL teams. So it's such a unique crowd, and
Okay.
you've got roughly 2,000 people in your objective area is planet Earth. So you're spread real thin, and the job is solving problems. So you have to have a really open mind on how to solve a problem, and you have to have a really receptive mind on identifying what the problem actually is.
Yeah. So that makes sense as far as going into politics goes. So you don't have any problem with a civilian having a rifle that has a pistol grip? You don't think
No,
that's okay? A flash hider?
no.
Because I think that
What's that?
I think it's I'm just going through the features that they're scared of. A flash hider, that's not gonna cause you
Nope,
any
no problem.
anxiety. Um, how do you feel about suppressors, sound
Fine.
suppressors?
See, I look at it this way. I'll give you a brushstroke on why they're all okay. The Second Amendment is very clear. Every state has a right to a citizen militia. If you're going to have a citizen militia, I want them trained with the best weapons that are going to beat the other guys. So I'm for automatic weapons. If that's what you want to have and you can safely maintain it, great. If you're not a criminal, you can get one. Flash suppressors are fine. Suppressors or silencers in the movies, those are fine. If you have a 30-round magazine, I don't care if you have a 100-round magazine. If you can effectively fire that firearm, then if our state needs a state militia, like the example of Texas, we've got people that are ready to go for some more basic training on how to militarize those skill sets. So the Second Amendment swings for both the states to protect themselves and the people to protect themselves and families to protect themselves as well.
Can we go back to Iraq for a moment? We didn't spend
Sure.
any time there.
Mhm.
And you spent a lot of time there. Um, and I'm asking you kind of run of the mill dumb questions, but did you lose any friends over there?
I did.
What was that like?
Well, I only lost one on my watch, but I was deployed in Iraq when Operation Red Wings happened in Afghanistan. And I knew a bunch of those guys. So it's heartbreaking. I mean, these are families, these are guys who went to training with. The kid that I lost on my watch was an EOD technician supporting one of the East Coast teams attached to my team. Great young man, good American, went out to go help Marines, and 6 Americans got killed when an IED went off as they were defusing. So killed on the eve of his 21st birthday. And it was a testament of how bad things are. It's very, very heartbreaking. But the silver lining was I got to escort his remains back to his family in Massachusetts. There was 10, 15,000 people lining streets and bridges as the funeral, as the hearse drove through with
Wow.
signs for this young man.
Wow.
You go into his house and his parents were, his dad was a elderly Vietnam vet. His mom was much younger than him, but she was younger than me. And their house was a shrine to their son and his military service. So there's hope for America because there's that kind of patriotism out there. It's sad that we have to see it through that kind of sacrifice.
Yeah.
But it was heartbreaking. The tougher part was after I retired, I've had a few of my friends take their own lives.
Oh.
And that's really, I can't imagine it. Can't imagine why. These are great, seasoned, retired leaders, friends. And I think we need to take a longer look at that and not go overboard with it, because I'm sure they wouldn't want us going overboard with it, but take a good enough look to where if we can save 1 or 2 more along the way, great. But that's been the bigger heartbreak's been afterwards.
What do you think?
Because when you're in, you sign up for it.
Yeah.
And everybody else did too. So you give them as honorable an exit as possible. When they're retired or they take their own life, you really want to find out why, so we can prevent the next one. And you want to prevent the other ones too, but this is much more personal because they've served their country already.
Right. Do you have any guesses about what the next step would be in terms of addressing that suicide issue?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Okay.
The challenge here is getting over the political side of it, because it's going to be politicized. It's been politicized.
Yeah.
And when they come up with new programs and new spending programs that say, we're going to go after military suicide, there may be 20% of whatever legislation actually addresses it. And all the rest is pork barrel spending in some district that has nothing to do with the military. That nonsense has got to stop. So I just think overall awareness throughout the country will help. and having Americans be much more proud to be an American. When you have kids that, we learned this in Vietnam, when kids came home from war and they were treated poorly. Now we have half of our country that wants to use the military as a social experiment. And that's
Right.
an insanely poor thing. We want our people to be proud of our young men and women in the military, and we don't want to use them as political social pawns for the next wave of woke nonsense.
Yeah, that bothers me too, because I think it loses sight of the fact that the military is there to win wars. We're there to fight and win. And once you start losing track of that, and that's your primary task, and it becomes like a college campus, it just seems like where are we
Well, they're
going from here?
restricting leaders' abilities to handle issues at their level because they've got, now if a kid gets in trouble, they can say, I was sexually harassed, I was gender harassed, I was racially harassed. They can say whatever they want. And it's actually, political correctness is a new form of bullying, but they've taught the very lowest ranking people how to bully up their chain of command and get away with it. So good order and discipline's got challenges now that it's never had before in the military.
Say that one more time, Larry. You said it's restricting leaders' ability to address issues at their level.
Right.
Yeah, there's too much bureaucracy, in other words.
Well, they've empowered very junior people to be able to bully their entire chain of command.
Yeah.
Through political correctness.
Wow, that's a really, really interesting way to put it. I don't think I've ever heard it put that way before. Yeah, that's not good. That's
No,
the
there's commanding
opposite of the way it's
officers
supposed to
afraid
be.
to, there's commanding officers and command master chiefs that are afraid, literally afraid to employ reasonable good order and discipline because of the repercussions of an accusation up the chain of command alone.
Oh man. That's devastating. I don't think we're ready for that. I mean, as far as the consequences of that, that's going to be devastating.
Well, it's just like some of the things that happened when Afghanistan kicked off.
Okay.
We had an enemy that fought back.
Yeah.
And it cleaned up a lot of the military that was, the kids that were there to get, I just joined to get my college education, not to serve patriotically.
Oh.
So that got cleaned up quite a bit. And the next conflict, China or Russia, will be formidable and will be challenged, will be pressed. And all of that nonsense in our military will be the first wave of casualties.
Yeah.
Because we'll have to reharden America and reharden our military to being a machine that goes out there and destroys the opposition. And America is not quite ready for that. So the first wave won't be good for us.
I'm wondering
there's still a lot of good patriotic
Sure.
Americans out there that are tough as nails that will show up on game day. They're just not on the team right now.
Yeah. And the system is weird now. It just feels like the system isn't the way it used to be. It feels like, to me, I see these officers, they're going through college, and I teach college, and so I know what the campuses are like. They're totally crazy. And it makes me sick to my stomach to see that this is what's being pumped out into America. And what you're seeing is, that makes perfect sense that the officers would bring that into the military, at least some of them. And so I'm not sure how much of this is top down or bottom up, like it's just entitlement, but it seems like it has to be legitimated from the top down.
It is.
From the president down. So I don't know.
I was in under Obama.
Yeah.
And under Obama, we had to do these general military trainings in the SEAL teams, 3 to 4 hours a week, where we'd get in and get taught, how to be okay with homosexuality classes, things like that.
Wow.
How to be okay with gender differences in combat. Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, we want to be concerned about shoot, move, and communicate, care about nothing else. And that's really,
right.
They've inundated the entire military from the top down with this politically correct military invasive takeover,
Mm.
but it's weakened our military in no uncertain terms.
And you were seeing the weakening of it while you were active duty?
I was
Wow. What was your last year on active duty?
2013.
Okay. So yeah, you were pretty far into Obama during that time. So there was a noticeable shift from Bush to Obama during your time in terms
Immediately.
of these GMTs. Oh, geez. Did you say that right? Did I get that right? You had
GMT, General Military Training, they call it.
You said 4 to 5 hours a week of GMTs?
3 to 5 hours a week.
3 to 5 hours a
It's
week?
worse
Really?
now.
Wow. Jeez.
And what we would do is we wouldn't do them for a couple of months and then sit everybody in a classroom for 2 or 3 days and just get them all done.
Huh. Okay. Wow. I definitely don't remember anything like that when I was in under Clinton, and yeah, we didn't have anything like that. That's interesting, man. It's just I feel so old talking to you right now. Seriously, you feel like
No,
younger than me.
If it helps, I was in under Clinton as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that does help. But man, holy cow. That's crazy. So was that ever an issue in the teams, like homosexuality? Do you feel comfortable saying? I don't know if you want to say. But.
No, you got to figure in every group of society, there's going to be that 1.6%
Sure.
that nobody knows about. And it was never an issue. I mean, if it came up, it was dealt with and done. It wasn't even really talked about because
Right.
it wasn't something that you were concerned about other things.
Yeah.
More concerned about, on the social side, your teammates, their families, your family. On the internal side, your skill sets as an operator.
Gotcha.
Shoot, move, communicate, do a good job. Those were much more important things about than periphery nonsense, like who's sleeping with who. Nobody cared. And now it's an emboldened and empowered thing. So it's become a centerpiece instead of periphery nonsense.
Yeah.
And I'm sure for that 1.6% of our population, it's not periphery nonsense to them. But that's not the military's job. I mean, the military's job is to go out and destroy something. Yeah. It's also not a democracy. It's also not a republic. I mean, if you want to look at our military holistically, it's a communist regime designed to protect a republic. Because you lose rights in the military.
Right.
And I have no problem with that because protecting our republic is worth giving up all of the rights that I gave up while I was in.
I think it's even worse now than what you were dealing with under Obama, because
I know it
now
is.
you have not. See, I was on the college campuses during this time. I wasn't in the military, but I was on the college campuses, and I was seeing that all the so-called progressives were saying, we just want to change the definition of marriage. That's all we want to do. It's fair. I was skeptical of that at that time. I was like, okay, usually if you want to change the definition of the word, you don't want to just do it with one thing, because the way they were doing it with marriage is they were saying that if you disagree with me, then you hate me. And so therefore I'm a victim of your hate. And so they were redefining the word hate to be disagreement. So they were already redefining the word hate. And I was like, I was tracking this, and I was like, no, that, because I teach logic, and that's part of the definitions of terms. You got to be right on with that. So I was, that's my skill set. And so I was pointing this out, and then it, as soon as the Supreme Court redefined marriage, then all of a sudden it was like really quick. It was like within a couple of years. Now all of a sudden the definition of man is, now we don't know what that is, and we don't know what the definition of woman is, and they started just adding letters. And I was like, see, I told you, you don't listen to me. And I've had a lot of students that I had 10 years ago say, I thought you were crazy 10 years ago. And now it's like you were a prophet. And that's what I deal with is being right about something. And then it's just like, no one listens. And then it's too late. And I feel like
Well, I
Yeah.
think that Supreme Court decision is going to be overturned as well.
Okay.
And really on
Interesting.
two fronts. And one personal front is, to me, marriage is a sacrament given by God between a man and a woman, validated in the church. Even though I've had a few of them, I still think that. But at the end of the day, it's none of the federal government's business. It's a faith commitment only. Now, where I think it's going to get overturned, since Roe versus Wade got overturned, it's going to be the same precedent. It's a 10th Amendment issue, because nowhere in the Constitution does it address definition of marriage.
Right.
So why the Supreme Court stepped in and made a decision in the first place, purely politically motivated. It needs to be challenged against, so they can go, it's none of our business. It's up to the states.
That's interesting. Interesting take on that. I mean, I just, there's so many, it's so interesting how wide ranging this conversation is. We've gone like from firearms training to combat. I was going to ask you about Iraq. I think I was in the middle of asking you about Iraq. I was going to ask
Right.
you, did you have any, I try to write down my questions did you have any, combat engagement before 9/11?
Yes. We had deployments to we had deployments to Bosnia, Kosovo, East Timor, and there were others. The South America guys, the East Coast guys in South America had plenty of bits and pieces that came together. So that just wasn't the frequency. Afghanistan, Iraq, you're operating sometimes 3 or 4 nights a week.
Yeah. Okay. I say, okay, as if I know what you're talking about, but I'm trying to keep up. Okay. I'm like, okay. Yeah. Okay. I know. No, I don't know, but I know because you told me. Okay. That's all I know. But okay. So when you're in Iraq, what was combat like for you? I mean, did it do anything to you? Did you feel yourself changing at all?
I've never had an issue, and maybe it's because there was a psychiatrist that we used to use in the military for mental toughness and conditioning your mind.
Okay.
And his thing was that maybe 3% of the military is actually wired to be in the military. The other 97% are good patriots that want to serve their country, and it's going to hurt them a little bit. I think I was part of that 3% because it never bothered me. And when I would get on the plane to come home, the switch was off, the other switch was on.
So you're good at compartmentalizing?
I've never had any issue with anything we did. The issues that I drug home with me would be usually bad administrative decisions that I would make along the way, or leadership conundrums that I wanted to struggle with because I wanted to get it right the next time, and that was really about it. The guys that went out and the combat operations, those were easier than we trained.
Yeah.
And because we trained a lot harder than we fought. And they all went pretty well. We had a good intel network. We had a great teams. So to me, it was about as good as we can get. When we worked with other forces, like we did a lot of time out in Eastern Iraq or Western Iraq, out in Western Al-Anbar with Marines. Right. They were great to work with. Love those guys. Haircuts look a little silly, but that's just Marines. They show up. So no issues for me on any of that.
The first time I saw a SEAL, and I didn't even know what, I was 18 years old. I had just gotten out of boot camp, and I was at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California. And I had just gotten off the bus, and there were some guys that were in these running shorts, and they had long hair. They kind of didn't look like they were in the military, but they did kind of look like they were in the military. Yeah. They all were wearing the same kind of sunglasses. And there was just a certain look. They had some of them had the mustache that looked kind of like a cop. And this is, I later saw one of them walking in camos. They were wearing camo at that time, and I was wearing like dungarees, and I saw the trident. I didn't know what it was. I saw it. There's just a certain look on them, and then I figured out, oh, okay, there's something different about that guy. He's in the Navy. Well, anyway, this one guy came up, one of the guys was short guy. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. I just can't remember any of these guys' names, but there was a bunch of SEALs there, and they ran a special PT thing. I think they ran the regular PT thing too, but I had run cross country in high school, and this guy with this mustache, he was shorter than me, came up to me and long hair, and I think he was a first class, and he said, "You're on the run team." And we had this Commanders Cup run team that we would, it was a joint base, so we would run against the Marines. The Navy had not, it was every month, and the Navy had not won since 1988, which was 5 years before. It was 1993. And so it was like we're supposed to run in formation. It was kind of silly, but somebody had a flag, and that's why it was actually hard, because you're only as fast as the slowest guy. So I was volunteered to be on this run team, and I was the only
Nice.
non-SEAL on the run team. And
That's
I remember
awesome. Good for
we
you.
we were missing one guy. There might have been another guy switched out that was not a SEAL, but there was a I was so freaked out with these guys. I mean, because I was PTing with them, and I just figured out later they were SEALs, and I was hearing them talk about stuff and got to know them a little bit. But and then later they did some small arms training with me. I got my pistol qual, and we went over to Fort Ord. That was great. That was just awesome. But they there was this one time, this is just a fun memory I have. We were missing a guy, and the race was about to start, and we were winning every time. We won like 7 months in a row. As long as I was on that run team, we won every time. And we were missing this one somebody on our team, and so they were like, "Where's Chief so and so?" And Chief so and so was a chief you never saw. He was a SEAL, and so he was not mixing around with everybody. So someone went and got him up. I guess he was taking a nap, and he had pillow lines on his face, and I mean, I don't even think he was like fully dressed. And he gets in our it was like a minute later we started running, and we won. And the guy's like 30 some years old, and he just woke up from a nap, and we still won. We still beat the Marines, which were all like 20-year-old, shaved head. Anyway, that's my little SEAL story. It's kind of
That's
fun.
awesome.
Yeah. So Larry, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your experience and your heart for America. It's clear you're a patriot. It's clear you love America, and you've done a lot for service of our great country. Is there anything else you wanted to share or talk about?
I guess collectively we're in a fight right now in our country.
Yeah.
And we're not, the fight's with our fellow Americans, but it's not really our fellow Americans. It's an ideology and a regime that wants to un-Americanize our country. And they've got people leaning their way that we need to actually be compassionate to and talk to and let them know why we love our country. There's not enough of that going on right now. Right now, it's why we hate the other side. And I think we need to be the leaders here, not the angry mob. Because if you're angry, you're just afraid.
How do you suggest people do that if they're struggling with anger?
Try and be nicer and identify anger. What's the source? What are you afraid of?
So deal with your fear. You got to identify it. A lot of people are not aware that it's fear. So I'm saying anger, you're going directly to fear.
Right. I mean, there's focused motivation, there's intensity, there's confusion, chaos, where there's always opportunity. But anger is just a little bit more focused and heightened fear. It's an aggressive fear. So what are you afraid of? What has it got you so hot and bothered that you're so afraid that you'd rather be angry? Or is this anger just an empowering tool to make a new bully out of you?
Wow.
There's some internal questions to ask, and then we just got to be a little bit nicer, but intolerant at the same time.
Have
As a
you been through
Republican, we're not
therapy?
going to out-Democrat the Democrats. What's that?
Have you been through therapy? Like
No.
psychotherapy? Wow.
Uh-uh. Well, I was in the teams. I had a million psychotherapists around me all the time. The other guys.
So you're like really in touch with your emotions, Larry.
Well,
how did you become in
I
touch
think
with your emotions the whole time?
I think it sounds funny, but I think if you're a patriotic American and you're willing to fight for your country, there's a passion to that. There's an emotional drive to that, and I believe that emotional drive is positive. So you have to be passionate. The military isn't stone cold bloody killers. The military is full of people that care enough about their country to do something that they're not naturally wired to do, kill another human being. So that takes a great deal of passion to drive it. And that's without emotion, you're nothing.
Have you ever killed anybody?
We're not going to have that conversation, but I've been part of it.
Yeah. Did you have any emotions at the time?
Same as always. Do the job, do the mission, focus, look after your buddies, look after yourself.
Okay.
Buddies
Did you
first.
ever feel like you were stuffing down emotions that you were having and just kind of stuffing just to deal with what you're dealing at the point? I mean, you have to do it. You have
Not
to deal
really,
with
because we've always had a great number of different focused releases.
Okay.
You can't be angry or ticked off or frustrated if you just got done working yourself out to exhaustion. Then you're just exhausted. So there's a lot of different releases out there. And we always had a shrinkweights. Big believer in, a coach for the mental muscle. That's just another muscle group that needs a good coach. So having somebody around that's a professional that can help shape the environment is a plus. Having really smart leaders along the way that shape the environment is huge.
Yeah.
You don't need to rely on stuffing it internally if you have a team you can rely on. So nothing really gets bottled up that much.
What do you still work out intensely at all?
Feebly,
Or
yes.
Okay. What's your workout routine like these days at your stage in life?
Well, I have not been working out for a few weeks because I'm having some knee issues, but normally it's a squirrel machine and weights in the garage. And then I've got a 1 mile track around the property to go run. And I did a lot of chores, busy running a
Take
ranch.
it easy.
So,
Yeah. Gotcha. And do you, as far as community and friendship, how do you go about maintaining community and friendship? Are you involved in a church? Do you stay in touch with people from the teams?
well, I stay in touch with the old guard. There's guys I stay in touch with. I'm new in Kentucky. I just moved here in March.
Oh.
So I still don't know hardly anybody. I just don't know a few folks here. So that's going to take some time. But I've got folks with the horses as a catalyst. So there's a place I'll go cattle sorting, and getting to know some of those folks. So there's a few things. It's a slow build.
Did you grow up believing in God? I hope you don't mind if I ask you that.
Absolutely, always have.
Okay.
It's never even been in question.
That's firm in your mind still.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Faith is always driven, and it's not. There's a lot of churches out there I don't like.
Yeah.
Because they're money making shams, but they're I've never questioned my faith, never questioned Christ, never questioned God. It's always been very easy for me to go, oh yeah, okay, we're there.
What was that like maintaining that when you were working in the SEALs? Because that's a hard
It was
job
easier in
to go to
leadership
church with.
position. Well, I didn't go to church. I didn't go to church very often. Just to me, it's a personal thing. But when I was a task unit chief or command operations master chief or command master chief, on those deployments, we'd say a prayer before we go out and off. Every group's got their one guy that's the resident Bible thumper. So I'd find out who that guy was, and hey, bless the bullets, bless the guns, let's go. Everybody's carrying grenades this time. Let's have an Our Father for the grenades. It was no issue at all from the leadership position, because
nobody was saying that's separation of church and state. Nobody was saying that.
Well, that's not a constitutional statement, so we're still defending the Constitution.
Yeah, but someone might still say it.
Yeah, if they did that, well, here's, you'll like this. So when I became a command master chief, there was one thing I made sure everybody got besides the individual sit down counseling with me, the whole command and all of our attachments. On the government dime, I bought everybody in the command a copy of the Constitution
Wow.
and
How
made them
cool
read
is
it.
that? How cool is
And then
that?
when I was at
Wow.
the logistics support command, I had the chiefs do homework on it. So
What?
people that were in the
Wow.
military that swore an oath to give their life for something they'd never read it.
That is awesome.
So the idea of church and state separation, it was really never a question on my watch because all the guys knew better.
Man.
And I say guys collectively, there were women too. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Of course. How do you feel about women in combat?
I don't like it. If our job is to go out and kill the enemy with the best foot forward, then somebody who's physically weaker shouldn't be on that best foot. I mean, they allow women in combat, but they won't allow a woman in the Navy to lift more than 40 pounds unaided. So it's a political move that's sacrificing young people. Now, are there exceptions out there? Sure, but we don't need to account for those exceptions because remember, the military is not a democracy. It's got a mission. We don't let handicapped people in the military. We don't let people with certain types of eyesight in the military. So those are all things that say the military's design is to be efficient, not to be socially correct. Now, there's areas in combatant or combat support roles where I believe women are actually better.
Okay. Like
For
what?
instance, would be women in EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, particularly on the diving side. And I've spent a lot of time scuba diving, so I know this. So women's bodies use oxygen better than men's do. Women's lungs have a natural layer of fat around them that protect them better. Consequently, for scuba diving, they're more suited to it. Women can handle certain types of stress for longer periods of time generally than most men can. I'm making general statements here. So if you were to take a woman and put her in a dive team EOD, I think they do a markedly or at least a noticeably better job than men. But there's a physicality that goes with that job as well, so that offsets it. You know, there's heavy things to lift, there's heavy gear to move. So, you know, there is that debate line right there. There's
Wow.
few.
Yeah.
But I don't see why we're getting stronger as a military, even though I heard an admiral say, women in combat makes us stronger. And he was just some fat pogue who had never been in combat. So, you know, I get his point of reference, but it doesn't make us strong. Women flying, yep. Women combat pilots, you bet. But the problem here isn't a woman pilot. The problem is when one of our women gets shot down
Right.
and captured by the enemy
Yep.
and brutally raped and beaten.
No.
We as a country, are we ready to take that? If a man gets abused in prison as a prisoner of war, we're conditioned for that. If one of our women gets the same treatment, we should never be conditioned for that. If we are, we've lost who we are.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
That with flying colors. In fact, you reminded me of another part of my training where I was involved with, where I was around SEALs, which I've forgotten about, which was SEER. And I went through SEER on Coronado, the Naval Air Station, North Island there. And as I was an air crewman, and there were females in that class, and not sure how much I could say about this, but they used that against us, put it that way, very effectively. And I remember thinking, going through the training, I remember thinking, wow, this would be so much worse if it was real life, and I'm having a hard time right now. You know, it's something I struggle with. I had this experience where a woman that I served with, when I got to my first deployment, I was trained by a female, and I thought she did a pretty good job. We were flying reconnaissance. And in fact, if you know George Bush's first big foreign thing that happened in 2001, it was an EP-3 that was crashed into by a Chinese fighter pilot.
Yeah, the pilot's name Wong Wei. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have some idea of what I'm kind of talking
Mhm.
about right now. So that kind of training, although I was with a different squadron, but that kind of training, I thought fine, but I did think it was distracting. I thought, and I don't say this as a personal thing. I say this as from an organizational systemic thing. I thought it was distracting the dynamic there, that we were not as focused on what we could have been doing. And if we were in combat, maybe we would have been more focused. I don't know, but my I got out of the Navy, kept in touch with some of these folks. One of those women became a master chief, and I was friends with her on Facebook, but she defriended me when we had a discussion recently on women in submarines, and I served in subsurface combatants in a support role, an intelligence role for special operations before there were any women on board.
Mhm.
There were never any women on board, right? So, I mean, I already feel so dated just even saying this. And I was trying to imagine just even birthing, because we were always in the weapons room and I was sleeping next to Tomahawk because I wasn't part of the crew. I was a special team that was on for a specific reason, a specific mission. And anyway, it's not like the disagreement was just about policy. It just felt like it was more than that. It felt like it was, again, like redefining the word disagreement to mean hate, like I think on her part, like
Mhm.
she's being manipulative, in other words. And
Well,
I
it's a
thought,
bullying.
geez,
It's a bullying tool.
yeah, it's like, well, I do have some experience here and I do feel like I have a legitimate point. And it's like you can't even say it with people just calling you names. And yeah, I'm not crying about it. I'm just noticing that's mistreatment. I don't feel like it's conducive to talking intelligently about this kind of thing. I think that if you're stuffing women in there for political reasons as a social experiment, as you call it, it might make people feel better, and they know how to say the right thing. Like that one, the guy you were saying, makes us stronger, the whoever it was, a vice admiral or whatever admiral
Mhm.
was saying that. Well, they know they're supposed to say that, but it doesn't mean it's true.
Right.
And I can't imagine. And maybe we're going to figure a way to do that, and maybe it's but it's always this fairness from this fairness consideration getting in there. And I think it clouds the issue of fighting and winning wars. And I wonder how much of our technology, the further we get from the battlefield, more we're pressing buttons and playing video games from Nevada or whatever, to kill people. The easier it is to say, oh, this is a bureaucracy, just like the Department of Labor or the IRS, and we have to hire anybody and then, promote based on, you know, minority status or these victim categories.
Well, the Navy, when I was in it, I had the privilege of sitting on a few chief promotion boards, chief, senior chief, and master chief. And it was a fair process. And it was a fair process that
That's good.
accounted for women and minorities being looked at differently. So, and in fact, a friend of mine who was a best friend I've ever had, black guy who retired from the fire department in San Diego, and they were having a problem with promotions.
Hmm.
And specifically, the minorities were not being promoted with their peers, with everything across all things being equal. And I
Mhm.
said, well, here's what we do in the Navy to make sure that doesn't happen. And he actually introduced that policy into their fire department, and it was implemented. So that the military's been pretty good about the promotion side of it. But the reverses happen. And that's the only cases I've ever seen of true discrimination in the military were there. Well, for instance, one year there was a couple of Master Chief lesbians that were on the corpsman promotion board. And there was a massive amount of cronyism on the women that they were promoting. Where they were caught, that board was, they got in big trouble for it. And the Navy cleaned that up. And then I saw one of the ships that I was on, because as a SEAL, you go to a lot of different ships as platforms that you're operating off of. There was one ship where the command master chief and black guy and a select crew of black sailors on the ship were this mob. And they were horrible how they treated anybody white. And he was subsequently fired from his job, and the Navy took care of that issue. Very fair and above board process. So I've seen the pendulum swing really only one way in the military, but I've seen it handled really well.
Oh, that's good.
And so, you know, if there's hope yet, it's on that front.
And you think that the folks that are getting higher ranks in the Navy and do they deserve it? And I ask you this as a Master Chief.
I think one of the problems that we've had is we've made flag officers have a presidential influence on their promotion sets, and Obama really misused that. He promoted a lot of people to flag who should not have been promoted to flag based on political influence. So at that level, it's politicized way too much. Then the Master Chief community has taken a chunk out of that book and has politicized it way too much as well. One of my students we had at the Senior Enlisted Academy, a young black chief who was a real go-getter. She made chief in like 10 years. So she was a hard charger. Yeah. And one of the questions, we get a student in front of the whole class and say, here's a question. And, you know, what do you think your future in the Navy is, or your future as a leader? And she said, well, I'm going to be the first black female Master Chief of the Navy. And so the next question was, well, what makes you so special? Well, it's time we had a black female Master Chief of the Navy. Wow. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. And, you know, then we beat the daylights out of her because it was like, oh, well, leadership's about everybody else. So this is only about you, and only because of your skin color, and only because of your gender. Why don't you just lead with, I want to earn it? And she got pretty upset. And then a few days later, she cornered me to talk to me, and she said, I really said the wrong thing. And she said, it's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to hope for a promotion. And I said, I hope you're not paying me lip service, because you're saying the right thing. Don't get promoted because you said the right thing. Get promoted because you do the right thing for somebody else. And you know, where she went, I don't know. But that was that was empowered at that point in time for her to stand up in that audience and even say that. So I can only think it's worse now.
It's got to be worse. I mean, that whole it's time thing, I can't tell you how many times I've heard it's time. Like, okay, so these major policies, see, I'm supposed to look at my watch. That's time. It's time for that. Oh, okay, great. And that's the level of thinking is you know, people will say what year it is. It's 2022, and so therefore this policy is right. Yeah, and it's like, no, that's not how it works logically. You don't just look at what time it is. I love that focus on your attitude.
Yeah. All we're doing politically and nationally is we're validating bigotry. We're validating racism. Yeah, you know, the president says, well, it's time we had a black woman on the Supreme Court. We're validating racism instead of saying, I'm going to find the very highest qualified person for the job.
Right.
And if it happens to be a black woman or Asian or white or whoever, fantastic. But I'm going to find the best person I can with my means for the job. No, he didn't. He went right down the racist road. We're going to throw a bone, not based on qualifications or capability. So yeah, we're validating racism on that note.
Well, that's insightful. Yeah, that's true. The whole it's time thing is kind of is pretty racist, actually. It's kind of odd too, because it's like, well, what was it not time earlier? Or like, you know, why is it time today? I don't understand. Isn't this supposed to be a timeless thing?
It's
I
mean, I
understand that
the president's down the polls. You know, that's surely what makes it.
Yeah, it's been a tough road for us on race on race, but I mean, time has nothing to do with it. It has to do with your attitude and your capabilities. Gosh, how are you doing on time? Ready to wrap this up?
Yeah, I mean, that's up to you. I got nothing going on.
Okay. I want to be sensitive to your time as well.
Sure.
I'm having a ball, Master. I keep wanting to call you Master Chief. I do have a few other questions I'd love to ask, because I think a lot of people are wondering how in the world you go through a career like that. Holy cow. And then you retire. Do you read? Do you play like board games? What do you do for fun?
I've got 60 acres to make it look like a park. So I've got a lot
Oh
of trees
gosh,
to
that's
cut
awesome.
down. I've got a lot of firewood to split for the winter because it gets cold here. I've got horses that need attention, and I have a pond on my property that has fish in it. So there's plenty to do.
Oh my gosh. What kind of fish do you have in your pond?
Well, so far, I've only caught little bluegill in there,
Mhm.
but I did get a snapping turtle close to the edge.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's all kinds of turtles in there. The fish are all too small to eat, so they just get caught and tossed back. But I'm just down the street from Nolan Lake, which is this huge lake. So yeah, there's plenty to do. Never a loss for something to do. And then because I kind of grew up the teams, the one thing you can say about every SEAL on the planet, boy, do they know how to relax.
Tell us what you mean by that. You don't mean
If I
drinking a
see a
lot.
nice cozy afternoon, I want to go
Yeah.
sit in a lawn chair or a couch or hang out and sit in a chair with my horses. It's real easy to do.
You just reminded me of a conversation early on when I was 18 running with those SEALs, where this guy was telling me about his way to take naps. And
Oh, yeah.
I have had to heard from this from a SEAL early on, because I like totally learned from this guy. He was telling me you sleep whenever you can.
Mhm.
I was like, what are you talking about? Sleep whenever you can. He's like, yeah, I sleep standing up sometimes. So that's funny that you say that. Uh,
Napping is an art, and every team guy is a master.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So okay, tell us about the napping skills.
So, if I'm driving and I get tired, I can decide if it's going to be a 9, 10, 11, 12-minute nap. And then I'll be asleep within 20 seconds and I'll wake up to the minute because that clock has already been developed. If I have time to take a long nap, like 30 minutes, and it's near as close to heaven as I'm going to get in this lifetime, then poof, nap. But naps are
Wow.
they're the most wonderful thing in the world.
I don't know how else you function otherwise, like in terms of some of the stuff you're doing. Did you learn that in buds? When did you learn that?
You learn it in buds, you define it over the years because buds training is hard, but in the teams things are hard. In buds, you've got this fabulous coaching staff that teaches you what you have to do and pushes you and drives you. Maybe not in the most nice manner ever, but they do that. When you're in the teams, things are harder, and there's nobody driving you. You have to drive yourself. It's expected. You have to show up because everybody else is. You have to know, be very comfortable with all your strengths and weaknesses, because your strengths are going to be leaned on, your weaknesses are going to be exploited, and time is one thing you sacrifice. So if your time is gone and you're in that environment, you have time for a 10-minute nap, you'll see 15 guys take 10 minutes when they get that chance, and
Wow.
They're all asleep in 20 seconds. How'd that happen? Yeah.
Wow.
Because we could. Yeah. So it's
And
definitely a piece of the culture.
You still have that ability to just dial it into the minute on how long you're going to be asleep?
I don't know. I haven't tested it in a couple of years, but I'm sure if there was if it was stress related, I would be able to.
So now what about napping positions then? Do you have to be in a certain position to nap, like bodily,
No.
I'm saying?
No, you can nap on a pile of rocks.
You could be sitting down and nap?
Anywhere, doesn't matter.
Wow.
Sitting, not standing, because I'd fall over.
I feel like
But
I feel like one of you guys, I don't know if it's you or somebody needs to like develop a program on that. And you would be a trillionaire. I think if you taught
Not
people
really,
how to
because you
do
got to
that.
go through such a painful
Oh, okay.
route to get there. You know,
Gotcha.
that's
People are not willing to pay the price. I got it. Okay. Interesting. Well, I appreciate naps, and I wish I had it dialed in like you do. Because I know that my performance goes way up when I have them, if I have a good
mhm.
one, but I haven't figured out exactly how to. I have figured this out. Um, get rid of all devices around me. No phones. No nothing. No little signals going through my body. Nothing. Just a different room. Also, I'm not tempted to look at my email or whatever because sometimes I'm just laying there. And yeah, you have time sensitivities. You have to get it done. And I feel a lot better when I get a nap in. So, do you, so you're like Ronald Reagan over there splitting wood on your 60 acres. Do you ever worry about trespassers?
Not in my neighborhood. It's a farming area. There's a lot of Amish in the neighborhood, so there's
Oh,
horse-driven buggies up and down the street every day.
okay.
But everybody's got a good sense of looking out for each other here. This is not a neighborhood where I would worry about trespassers at all,
Do you carry a
unless
gun
it's
when you're walking around?
no. When I'm going shooting, I do, but not really. I mean, if it's turkey season, I could see people trying to sneak on the property because there's a lot of
Yeah.
them here.
Oh, okay.
But but even still, when it was turkey season a few months ago, the neighbors came over, knocked on the door, said, "Would you mind if we went and hunted backside of your property?" Go ahead. I don't like wild turkey. Get them all.
Wow. You don't even ask for one of them?
No,
That's
I just
nice.
give it away.
Can you shoot deer on your property?
I can. In fact, I inherited a deer head trophy in the living room of the house that was off the property. And I've seen a number of deer on the property. And there's a deer stand that's like a little house shed on the back 40 by the hay field on my property. So
Wow.
when deer season comes up, and I have not been deer hunting, but when deer season comes up, I'm gonna definitely get one.
Oh man, you got
And
to
there's
go.
a processing place right down the street
Hmm.
that you drive right down there and drop it off, come back in a week and pick up nice
You don't,
packaged meat for the winter.
you don't even have to skin it. You just bring the whole body.
Nothing.
Wow,
Yep.
that's nice.
I mean, it's
That's
10
really
minutes
nice.
away. So
Oh, geez.
throw it in the truck, drive down the street.
Wow. I'm glad you're having an awesome retirement. That's awesome. That makes me
It is.
happy. That makes me real happy. So, you got naps, crime, reading. Did you say you do reading? Do you ever read books?
I used to read a lot. I don't as much anymore. And I need to reinvigorate that. I used to read a lot on deployments because that's what you would do at night or during the day when you were supposed to in a sleep cycle.
What kind of books would you read when you were deployed?
Anything
Like
from
novels?
anything from the Bible to Harry Potter to novels to quick reads to it didn't really matter as long as it had a pace to it.
Are people easy to get to know in Kentucky? Have you tried to get to know your neighbors?
A few so far. People are very friendly here and very well mannered, which I appreciate to no end. And if I was, I'm sure, a lot more proactive about meeting all the neighbors, I'd know all the neighbors. I'm still digging in.
Yeah. And are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, in the Myers-Briggs type indicator test, I'm a extrovert.
No kidding. Oh, Larry, if you're an extrovert, you would be perfect for politics.
I've run for office.
You have?
Mhm.
Really? What did you run for?
I ran for the House of Representatives when I first got out.
No kidding. Was that in San Diego?
In San Diego. It was in the district I grew up in, and a guy that had been running the last 2 terms. This is against Susan Davis, a longtime Democrat incumbent. And Nick Popovich, a wounded Marine, had been running. And I got out, and I was at some Marine thing as a guest speaker, just as a retired Master Chief. And he asked me if I would run. He goes, I've done 2 of these. I can't do it anymore. Would you run? And it was in the neighborhood I lived in and the neighborhood I grew up in. So I said, sure. A great learning curve. A lot of disappointments in the political environment, people in that industry, but great experience. And I think against Susan Davis, nobody had gotten above 30 points. It was a plus 29% a Democrat district, and I walked with 43% of the vote. So it worked out real well.
How many percent of the vote did you get? 33?
43.
43? Wow.
Yeah.
In a plus 21 Democrat district.
Plus 29 Democrat district.
How did you do that?
Well, when I was a kid, I used to box and wrestle with Jackie Robinson Y in East San Diego, Southeast San Diego. It was the Black community. So I knew a lot of folks there, and I would go to every event I could in every neighborhood Susan Davis would not. She was a rich, white Jewish woman, but she was a Democrat. So she wouldn't show her face, south of Interstate 8. And because I would go to these different neighborhoods, well, I was very comfortable, and I didn't grow up in a wealthy family by any stretch. And in sports as a kid, I'd been around all these neighborhoods. They're just folks to me. So I would go and listen to community issues and problems. And I would tell them, hey, House of Representatives can't solve your community issues, but there's a bully pulpit that good politicians can use to help.
Yeah.
Because the House of Representatives is to run the country's business, not the district's borders business. That's why we have state and local politicians. And I said, but I'm willing to show up, and I'll put my noisemaker against problems if they make sense to me. If it's moral, legal, ethical, and constitutional, we're game on. So that seemed to resonate, and it worked out real well.
Wow. So are you ever going to run again?
It's I don't know. I can't answer that. I'll have to, after the primary, and I get with my buddies, Kentucky political powerhouse, the guy that's running his campaign in Wisconsin right now. We're going to discuss that. Probably not. I'll get more satisfaction if we can get some of the inner city shooting and empowerment events going. And Desiree's clearly the point person on women's outreach. So there's team effort.
Well, that's good.
So that will give me a lot more satisfaction than traveling to the House of Representatives to work in that swamp,
right.
A third of my time.
I agree with that. That's really good. Yeah. What are you going to call that outreach effort? Do you have a name for it?
No idea yet.
I got to come up with something snappy.
No idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. A real problem for Nazis, I think I'll call it. Yeah.
Maybe shorten it a little bit. Something that's you can say, because people have a short attention span. But that's all really good. So do you think
Just
Derek is
crime reduction? I think it's what we'll call it, just crime reduction.
Or do you think that maybe you could name it after Otis McDonald or something? There's something there. Then people Google Otis McDonald and go, "Oh, he was black," and that whole story.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, honor him. I was going to ask you: is Derek in Wisconsin? Is he going to win, you think?
Yeah, he's polling really well now. He's had some real good support. I think he's raised probably $5 or $6 million, which is real helpful. He's an open door kind of guy, so he's not going to not talk to anybody.
Yeah,
and he like most team guys that are in politics, he'll show up in any neighborhood. He doesn't care. He really he's authentic about what he's doing. He's authentic about being a pure constitutionalist. So it makes him freedom loving and embrace every American, not just our side.
Yeah. And kids will love him because he was SEAL.
Mhm.
What
And he don't
kid
look
would
like
not
Seal.
want that? What
You know, if there is a
teenager
way to look like a SEAL, he doesn't look like a SEAL.
really? What do you
Yep,
mean
kind of
by that?
doesn't look athletic, unassuming, nice guy, and he was a really good SEAL.
Huh. I can't quite tell because you're kind of in the dark, but I can't tell how long your hair is.
It's
You
shorter
don't
than
look like I can't
yeah. I,
tell how long it is. You don't look like a SEAL haircut to me. Maybe you're a senior enlisted or something. I don't know.
yeah, I've kept it shorter throughout the years just because when my hair grows out, it looks like a poodle. So
I
keep
hope
it
he
short.
does win. Um, yeah, and I'm really loving all the strategic element of how you're thinking. I think that needs to catch on all across the country in different of these states where there's similar stuff going on. Where I've always kind of wondered places like Kentucky whether how strong the Second Amendment community is. And I think some of these states that are really solid on the Second Amendment, they get kind of lazy and they get like thinking like everything's going to be okay. And then, they're not really
Well, the
organized.
other thing too is
So,
now Kentucky, the Second Amendment is very strong everywhere but Louisville, Lexington, Bowling. And the thing that I found out since I was in California, and this was pointed out to me, I'm hypersensitive because of living in California. California is anomalous. California, New York City, Chicago, Detroit, those are all anomalies of normal Americans.
yes.
They're crazy, they're insane.
Yeah.
But the rest of the country is actually a lot better.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
I
Right.
would love if I was going to have a pinnacle of all this that I could say, okay, now go ahead and shoot me because I'm done. And that would be teaching small arms classes in South Side of Chicago and having the room filled with 100 people every time
Oh man.
because
How do
then
you
we're empowering the citizen.
create that and it will be funded, I guarantee you. I mean, how do you have any idea how that would be structured and funded?
Not well, the funding. So we'll get no funding from Democrats in Illinois because their power base is based on
Yeah.
a massive
Of
amount of
course.
people they keep down
Yeah.
and they keep dependent.
Right.
It's Nazism. So would the Republicans fund that? I think after it caught on, if it looked like something they could get political horsepower out of, they would. There's a lot of individual Americans out there that
Yeah.
would fund it. I
Individuals. Yeah.
think Glock North America would probably be a good sponsor. I think Smith and Wesson, who just moved from Massachusetts after, century because of how bad things are. I think they would be a reasonable sponsor. I don't think getting sponsors would be that difficult.
Okay.
But my test bed is going to be Louisville.
Okay.
And I want to politically test the waters because there's going to be more people fighting it politically in Louisville than not. I mean, the program we were doing in California
Really
that
sad.
Desiree Payne actually started was women's outreach under Sheriff Chad Bianco in Riverside's
Yeah. Yeah.
county. So I would be the range safety officer and run the range, and Desiree would get the class. And the outreach was mostly women, mostly minorities, and they all left wanting to go buy themselves a handgun. They all left in love with the idea and a smile on their face. So we've tested it. The theory is tested and successful. But we had a
Yes.
sheriff backing it. So now if I
That's
go to
right. That's
Louisville,
right.
the sheriff, he won't back it.
You won't back it. Okay.
He's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat that's been there for decades.
Huh.
And he's, why would he change his own success? He has power now.
Yeah.
Crime rate's through the roof, but he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting apathy, you can't fight apathy or the source of it. You have to fight with the people that still do care. So I got to go find those people.
Wow.
And that's my challenge.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have people thinking about you and wanting to support you, I think, after hearing you. And I'll bet praying for you as well.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On
I
that,
appreciate
on that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you got me sold on this. I mean, this sounds like the key. for states like Kentucky. I can't wait to hear more about what the next foot forward when you have a name for it and kind of an organizational way to do it, however you end up doing it. Do you have a website that you want to share or anything like that?
We,
People want to get in touch with
I
you?
think because we haven't socialized this out on the website, when we do, I
Okay.
believe it's going to be under Vanguard,
Okay.
um, Desiree Payne's website.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
So it'll be an on part of the organization as well. I'm proud to say so. So when we get to that point, that will be the place to go to. Right now, you just see female firearms instruction and what we've been doing in California. So that will be where it goes, but not yet. We're not ready for prime time quite yet.
Okay. Well, I might have to, because of the assault weapon ban and being considered in the Senate, I might have to speed up the release of Desiree's episode and your episode here because we ended up talking about it. And I mean, got a few people ahead of you in terms of posting, but I'm going to switch some things around and get you guys up before that because of the politics of the whole thing.
Great.
And yeah, I've really enjoyed this this time with you. Thank you for sharing everything that you shared, and thank you for your service as well.
I appreciate it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. And the invitation's open. Come out to Kentucky and hop on a horse or go down to the lake fishing.
Oh man, you're gonna regret you said that, Master Chief, because I might just take you up on that. Because
Okay.
I'm a Colorado boy, and I miss being out in the open fields and open woods. I miss it.
We got it right here in the backyard.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, sir. Thank you. Have a great day.